and welcome to the Master Voices podcast, where we invite a diverse range of masterful voices to explore subjects ranging from music and language to history and culture. This pod is a project of the New York City nonprofit Master Voices, formerly known as the Collegiate Chorale, which then, as now, is dedicated to the unique power of the human voice to connect, unite, and inspire. Over the next few episodes, we're exploring the extraordinary opera Blind Injustice, which tells the stories of 6 men, women, and teens who were wrongfully incarcerated, spent decades in prison, and were finally exonerated thanks to the hard work of the Ohio Innocence Project. In our first episode, guest host Randall Eng, a composer and Master Voices collaborator, sits down with the composer and librettist of Blind Injustice, Scott Davenport Richards and David Cote. Together, they dive into the process of writing Blind Injustice, what it means to tell the real and often harrowing stories of living, breathing people who were very much a part of the show's creation, and what to expect from the new Master Voices production. We hope that this series on Blind Injustice will allow you to share our love for this truly exceptional work. Music excerpts heard in this episode are from the 2019 Cincinnati Opera live recording, used with permission from the composers. And now, without further ado, sit back and enjoy the Master Voices podcast.
Scott and David, welcome.
Hi, Randall.
I'm so excited to be talking to both of you about this piece, which I've been knowing about for a long time, and I've known both of you individually for a very long time. And I saw this piece at Montclair Skate State and was blown away by it. It's an incredibly powerful piece with a very lush and varied score, and I'm thrilled that it's happening in New York now. So let's start by I'll ask you, how are you feeling about this? What does it mean to you to be doing this now?
I mean, I'll start since David didn't jump in. I mean, basically, I'm terribly excited. I mean, the idea that Master Voices is doing this and doing this on the scale that that I imagined in my ears might be possible, but thought would be difficult to actually achieve with 120 voices. And I'm really looking to hearing that happen in the Rose Hall at Jazz Lincoln Center, which is an amazing room. It's acoustically wonderful, and we're going to have this wall of chorus at the back of the stage. And I mean, I'm really excited to hear that. It's going to be something.
Eugene is free. He's walking through the gates. Eugene is free. I can breathe. Eugene is free. I can see, God, all the colors dancing in my song. Eugene is free.
I'm also, the idea of being able to share this with New York audiences in the piece in such good shape as it is, because Ted knows the score so well now and can embrace the theatricality of it, the momentum of it. It's a piece that I think that moves very fast. I think it's going to be great because the audiences see that it's not just a traditional opera, whatever that is. It's a mixture of theater and opera and documentary. There's about 40% of the libretto is taken from interviews with the exonerees. And so I think that it's going to be exciting to show what opera can do when it exists on a continuum of music theater, and that it's not just trying to, replicate some European idea from an opera should be. And yeah, so again, I think New York audiences will really appreciate that.
How do you feel like the piece reads today? It premiered when?
2019.
Yeah, 2019.
So 2019 in Cincinnati, and then Montclair was last year?
Yes. And
then this is the third time it's being put up?
Yes, there was a version in Colorado as well.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the size of the chorus was smaller to begin.
Yes, we began. The whole piece began as a commission by a Cincinnati Opera and the Young Professionals Chorus of Cincinnati. And so they were part of the original commissioners. So it was conceived of as in a choral way to begin with. And after meeting the chorus and meeting, I, as a composer, I realized, I really need to write some music for the chorus as a character, because one, it's there, it's big, it's important, and the character of the society in which this injustice exists is a huge character, and it needs to be present in the piece in a big way.
Yeah, it's even though it's about the criminal justice system and these horrible miscarriages of justice. We have no courtroom scenes in the opera. There's a prosecutor and a defense, these sort of archetypal figures who go back and forth and argue. But in a sense, the audience is the jury, but also we have this mega jury, I guess, of the chorus members in a sense. So it's going to be, is it like 24 member chorus in Cincinnati?
In Cincinnati, it was about 30, and around 24 in Montclair.
I think one of the most powerful things about this piece is the way that the choral writing in general, but also the way that the chorus is sometimes used as to represent the system, and sometimes used to represent kind of a broader sense of who these individuals are. I mean, the end of the piece is just a knockout. So, and you said that it was a Cincinnati youth chorus, Scott, is that what you said?
The Young Professionals Choral Collective. That's it, in Cincinnati, which is an organization sort of like MasterVoices in Cincinnati, in that it's people from the community who want to sing choral music and choral rap, and want to stretch what they do.
Oh. I mean, I'll say from my own experience of working with MasterVoices, the most powerful thing about that experience was getting to work with a chorus that was made up of people from a wide range of backgrounds, who had a wide range of views on, what the topic was. So moving now to like this very much larger group of people, with this range of ages as well. How do you think this will, what are you thinking about in terms of the differences of how you did this before and what this larger version means to you?
Well, to me, it means larger, because what we really get the sound when you have the chorus shouting "guilty, guilty," that it will be the mob that's actually coming for these characters, and we will have that effect in the room. This is going to shake. This is, I mean, I haven't heard it in the room yet. This should be shaking the room.
2 counts of rape by force or threat of force. Felonious assault. 2 terms of life imprisonment.
The nice thing about the orchestration is, one thing I've noticed in orchestrating, as soon as you add a drum set to the band, you have to amplify the voices. And so we will have a sound system, and we will have the ability. And it's a 12-person band. And it was orchestrated in a way so that the chorus can fill up the middle. So there are 3 violins and a cello. Like ordinarily, we might think of, I have a string quartet, so I can cover the middle. But this way, we can actually have the violins playing high notes up top, and it doesn't sound too squeaky. The chorus fills out the middle, like the bass trombone, bass clarinet, and bass fill out the bottom. And between that and the chorus, it manages to sound really huge. And that's just a little technical orchestration choice for the whole piece.
I think for any chorus member too, it's an incredible range of modes that they get to sing in terms of what their function is in the opera. I mean, the very opening is this Scott's created this weave of place names, because I wanted to start the piece with the names of the towns where the crimes where the people were accused of committing crimes they didn't, or where the crimes took place and the wrong person was accused, and also the places where there are penitentiaries and prisons. So to like sort of weave all these Ohio place names into a kind of choral I don't know, kind of incantatory choral opening, because of course all these cases took place in the state of Ohio. So somehow I wanted the land, the towns to be, I don't know, invoked at the beginning. And that's just one kind of lyrical section. And then, of course, you have male members of the chorus, mostly playing prisoners who threaten and sort of verbally harass Clarence in the night in prison when he had a mental breakdown, in a very sort of dramatic scene where he recounts that story. So, you know, they play characters, they play a range of characters and modes, and you know, in the piece.
I would say there's a very David's talking about a very harrowing scene when Clarence is in prison and the other prisoners are threatening to set him on fire, and Mark had to really warn Clarence, who the actual Clarence was going to attend, and Mark had to actually send him the demo as a trigger warning first, so that he wouldn't be confronting this like initially, and to come into a room and suddenly be faced with this, so that he could prepare.
Wow.
And he really did need that because the real event was so completely harrowing for him.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit now. So the genesis of the project is that you had these stories. You had a lot of stories, right, to choose from. And you were in touch with some of the people that this was with all the people that you chose, right?
Right. We did interviews with all 6 people involved in the 4 cases, as well as Mark Godsey, of course.
How did you?
Those are new interviews that we just sort of, that we drew a lot of material out of.
I'm curious about the structure of the piece, and how you came about the choices of which stories you were going to tell and what order you were going to tell it, and how you could relate the different individual stories to each other.
Well, Mark, you know, kind of brought the 4 cases, you know, Nancy Smith, Clarence Elkins, the East Cleveland 3, and Ricky Jackson. I mean, he brought those to us as cases that he thought would be the most dramatic, and they were, you know, as I always say, each one of these stories could have been a full-length opera on its own. And so, so there was a wealth of information to go with. So, how do I? The structure of the opera is telling all 4 cases in it's obviously a very abbreviated fashion because it's a 90-minute opera. We're trying to talk about the flaws in the system, with forensics, with eyewitness testimony, as well as talking about their cases and how they eventually were exonerated. So it's a lot of material. So it's necessarily kind of like this. Each individual has their own story, but they go on a group journey from beginning to end in the opera, from their lives being taken away from them to being exonerated at the end. So it's episodic, I guess, is to answer your question. It's a very episodic piece that goes between first person narrative from the exonerees to sections that are they're invention, but they're informative.
What I thought was really brilliantly done by David and Robin, as they were putting this all together, was the way they found we have these 6 individual people, four cases, but with all of them there were commonalities between their experience with the justice system, and so and this is just one example of the way this works. At the end of Clarence being when Clarence says, "They put me in the hole," and then we transition from Clarence as being thrown into the hole, and then we experience Larissa's experience of the hole when he sings the hole. So So because of the common narrative of a prisoner's move through the justice system, it allows us to almost tell one story with all the same characters. And I think that is something that David found really brilliantly.
Robin Guarino, your director and colleague in this work. So was the structure set before Scott started writing music? It seems like the kind of piece that is modular enough that some music could be written and then affect what the structure ends up being.
Yeah, I mean the interview, they wanted to fast track just doing the interviews and getting the material first. So Robin and I interviewed the exonerees. There were follow-up interviews that we all participated in, but the initial sort of info gathering happened, and then we sat down and said, okay, what are the impressions or memories from the exonerees that really pop and could be dramatized? What are the pieces of information from Mark's book, also called Blinded Justice, can we extrapolate and feed to the audience? And so we had a structure and we had a draft of the libretto that we brought to Scott because we needed to find the exact right composer who could do this, who could be, I don't know, versatile enough and have dramatic chops and also write music that was appealing and varied and would drive the story forward. And so, I was very scared when I sent him the draft of the libretto, because I was like, okay, he might be like, no, it doesn't appeal to me. Or
and I said, no, this is my thing. This is this is how I felt like I knew exactly how to do this. And one of the nice things that I really liked is that David and Robin wanted a range of styles that represented the United States and represented all the peoples of the United States. So that which is something that's very, very close to my heart, and I don't like being limited in that way. And I mean, from my point of view, I look at music as there's an element of design. You design based on a place. You design based on a character. You design based on a character's wants. They were eager to hear a bunch of different styles, but then how the difficulty is, how do you not make it pastiche, and how does the change in style not take you out of the moment and take you out of the character? So I think the trick to that is by being consistent in motive through all the different styles. Make sure that the motives are all based in a character and in a character's need. So when we first meet the prosecutor, he's introduced by a bass figure in 5/4, like bum bum ba dum bo doo doo dum bum ba dum.
What makes a person a criminal? What makes a person? Experts got 100 soft answers, but not one good hard one. How's this? They're bad guys. Sick, broken, defective, diseased, human garbage. And me, I'm your garbage man.
So, from my point of view, he's a broken person. He's a person who walks asymmetrically, and he's a person who, and that asymmetry is there in the 5/4. Then that's shared by Ricky when he is in prison later and he's broken, and that same motive is taken and moves the other way. And instead of a downward motion of the figure, it goes upward.
The following morning, we were taken through the obligatory lineup. We were never actually pointed out as the perpetrators by this kid that was supposed to have seen us commit the crime. Edward Vernon, 13 at the time, he was prone to fantasies. He embellished a lot of stuff, or just made it up.
We have there's the number "Getting the Job Done," which is all the prosecutors singing how they look at their point of view as, I need to get this job done, and they sing justice, getting the job done, and that the rhythm of that then becomes the bass is the rhythm for pieces all the way through. When as they're all being thrown in jail, the basses are playing do 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 dum bum, and so that we in our minds we think we remember, or we subconsciously remember that lyric, getting the job done, so that even though the styles might be changing, the actual musical material is consistent all the way through, and we remember those lyrics as we're hearing it.
Scott referred to the scene called Guilty, which is where the exonerees they recite the crimes that they were, falsely convicted with, and yeah, getting the job done is sort of like grinding under it as the chorus comes in with it, saying guilty in a hair-raising, accusation, and I remember, I don't know if we talked about this, but it's like a meat grinder, or it's like this machinery is grinding, getting the job done. I can't say it, but it's like this kind of machine that's just eating people up, and it's just terrifying. It's harrowing.
Murder, 15 to life. Murder, 18 to life. Murder, attempted aggravated murder. 2 counts of rape by force or threat of force. Felonious assault, 2 terms of life imprisonment.
And I will say, in terms of the pattern, obviously you strive for patterns as well, or motives in terms of words. The first line of the opera is, what makes a person. I mean, it's the prosecutor who says basically what makes a person rape, what makes a person kill, what makes a person a criminal.
What makes a person rape a grandmother and bludgeon her to death, then rape and beat the 6-year-old girl in the next room? What makes a person throw acid in a stranger's face, hit him 14 times with a pipe, shoot him in the head? What makes a person molest little kids? What makes a person kill a stranger in the street like a dog?
And then the end of the last thing, of course, is Alicia, a law student who works with the Ohio Innocence Project, who's asking, what makes a person strong enough to endure injustice? So it's like this arc of the questioning, people who are wonderful, but also very flawed.
What makes a person? What makes a person strong enough? What makes a person strong enough to
It's a kind of closed question at the top and then an open-ended question at the end for me. And it's similar to what you're talking about, Scott, there's so much kind of connecting material that really makes this thing feel like not. I mean, I spoke about it as like something that could be modular, but it feels like something that is very unified because of how the score, both texturally and musically, is kind of always reminding us of how things are kind of like, interrelating with each other. And for me, that opening figure for the prosecutor is tracking as like confidence. There's a real kind of sureness for the way he kind of owns that then when you kind of like change the contour of it for Ricky, feels very different, but while maintaining that kind of sense of brokenness that you're talking about. So it's really how some things are kind of similar, characters are similar on one level and then like very different on another level, I feel. Is done really powerfully. Let's talk a little bit about the question of verbatim. Like, so you said, David, that 40% of this is verbatim text. And how do you make the decisions on what is gonna stay the way it was and what you want to kind of reshape?
Yeah, I mean, we had about 20 hours of interviews, give or take, and tons of pages of transcripts. So, Robin and I had to pick what episodes we thought were really popped, that really told the story. Um, so novelistic details, of what happened the day that they were arrested, how they survived. The 10 poles were that tell us about the day that you were, arrested or accused or detained by the police. Tell us about your time in prison and what was hitting rock bottom for you in prison? What was that? How did you survive in prison? And what was the process of getting exonerated? So that was sort of like, how those were the main things that we asked. For one example, I would say the scene of the crime with the East Cleveland Three describing the crime that they witnessed, that was eventually, pinned on them. They all described driving in the car down the road and seeing this murder. And for the libretto, I had to sort of like pick each of their reminiscences from that and sort of weave it together into a group, put them all in the same room, even though they were all interviewed separately.
Yeah, we was driving around, just hanging out. It was a beautiful day, like any other. Here's the street. We was driving down the street. The street is set up so crazy because they got these railroad tracks.
And then, I don't know, Scott, somehow you made that so cohesive.
Well, thank you. So we have a trio of young men. They are a trio, and they are also individuals, and want to step out either in front of each other, behind each other, and they are really tight as friends, but they also want to be individuals. So somehow managing to. There are times when they all sing together, and times where they have their own lines. Choosing a musical palette and a rhythmic palette that comes out of the time in which they are arrested. I wanted a new jack swing, of a sort of a triplet hip hop swing. That's if I'm going to beatbox it like that, which I was familiar with from Washington D.C. and from Go-Go, and which was very much of the time that they were arrested. At the same time, it also gave us the same feel of the Sesame Street theme. So that we understand at the same time that they're also just kids, and they really are children who are going out to try just have fun on a beautiful day. And so hopefully all of that comes through.
Yeah, and they describe the streets and the weird arrangement of a bridge that goes across the street and a stop sign that, that they nearly hit oncoming traffic when they drive away. And it's just sort of like, it's testimony, but it's testimony that reveals so much character, and so much, as Scott said, their bond as friends.
And how much of that was verbatim?
Well, I mean, it was all verbatim, but verbatim's, every line in the libretto has been tweaked or massaged in some way.
Mhm.
So, but I mean, I did weave it together or repeat things. Yeah, it's taken. It wouldn't exist without their responses in the interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's astonishingly fluid, and I think that's kind of one of something that Scott is just very good at, is making kind of long bits of text feel like they're kind of totally natural, even when they are coming from more of a prose kind of background. Let's talk a little bit more about this sequence, because I find it like one of the most exciting kind of transformations of music functioning as one thing to functioning as another thing in the score. So, Scott, you've kind of described the opening of this, where they're cruising around, and there's a real kind of precision to the way that the orchestra is working here. It feels like everything is like in sync, and all these like offbeat piano hits, which for me, maybe it's because the word street is happening so many times in this sequence, made me kind of think about the scene in X, with the character street. And then they get to this moment of singing about the blind spot, and it almost feels like a fun thing, the way that the three voices come together on that. And I'm thinking about this, them reaching this place where they can't see anything, and it almost feels like, okay, this is part of our kind of like chilling out thing. And then everything turns, and you're kind of move from writing from the point of view of being inside these characters, and they're kind of like they don't have that many cares, into something terrible is happening in front of them, and we're kind of witnessing along with them this tumult. So tell me a little bit about this next sequence then.
Well, they witness a shooting, and so they're blind spot, and they come upon these two characters, and the three are describing what the characters are doing. In the stage version, we see what they're doing, and it's described. And one character is, and they're distinguished because one character is swing eighth notes, and the other character is straight eighth notes. So those two rhythmic ideas are in conflict in that moment, and then everything goes crazy, and we have a big fast jazz ride cymbal, somewhat not atonal, but modal move, as they are all chasing and everything, and they're in the middle of a gunfight, and all of the hits of the gunfight are in the orchestration. So I hope that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, it's very kind of, I feel like now I'm observing with them, right? And instead of kind of like being in the place of feeling, their kind of ease, now I'm kind of like it's like maybe I'm going from being in their heart into being in their eyes or something like that. And the kind of aggressiveness of which that drum set takes over is really powerful.
The dude turned around and he just shot him. That's funny. And when I seen that, I be like, oh no, oh no. Everybody kind of ducked down. Oh no. And when we raised up to see what was going on, he was being shot. Oh no. Behind the truck, he took off to the other side of the street. And the guy shooting at him a few more times.
And then they are safe, and this oscillating harmony thing starts to happen, as they're describing, kind of like they're saying they're witnesses, and it's almost a moment of repose for a sec.
We committed no crime,
but we was witness to a crime.
We couldn't believe what they were saying.
We told them what we saw.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it feels also kind of like, to me, it feels like there's a menacing air that comes in, and because the music is suddenly like it's like the walls are closing in on these guys. It feels like.
Yeah, I mean, is that kind of for me? That is what happens as the kind of music gets louder, and we go from kind of being inside these characters to now being, kind of being these characters being swallowed up by the music. It's a really fascinating moment for me to see how the music shifts from depicting kind of the emanating from inside them to kind of enveloping them the system is kind of now this sonic wall. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the conception of that, Scott.
Well, the image I had in my mind for it was the planet-eating cornucopia from the original Star Trek.
Tell me more.
There was a start. It just that's what came to my mind. There's this big giant, like, 50 million mile wide cornucopia that goes from galaxy to galaxy eating planets. And that's what I had in my mind for the image of their being literally swallowed up by this. So it allows the scale to become greater than, are you going to think about a giant planet eating cornucopia, or are you going to just think of a meat grinder? Like, which would you set for an orchestra?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that the orchestra is as small as it is, because you're able to convey such a sense of scale in it, and sometimes it's a lot of big band sounding stuff, and then sometimes it's sounds like a chamber ensemble, but when it's large, it really feels large. I feel like hearing this at the Lincoln Center, at Jazz Lincoln Center, is with these forces the scale of this thing is gonna be very powerful.
Can't wait.
Yeah. So then we get into this spoken section. Then after that, we get into the wonder of forensics. So that's you started talking at the beginning about some of the kind of opera plus aspects of this, that it's opera, but it's also kind of has elements of other kinds of things. And the spoken kind of textures are part of that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from both of you about the way that you're using spoken text.
Hold on. It wasn't just Tamika's testimony. The East Cleveland Three were found with gunshot residue on their shoulders and jackets.
Gunshot residue tests can produce false positives, chemicals you can pick up anywhere.
Like the back of a police car, or being handled by the police, who routinely have residue on them from target practice.
Well, I mean, I was always impressed that Scott didn't mind leaving sections to be spoken. Did you ever? I mean, was that I guess we never talked about it. Did you ever wrestle with that, Scott, in terms of like?
No, not really. It's usually the information without emotional content, or with information with very little emotional content, or when it's just information. Then we don't really, doesn't need to be sung. I think it's just much. It gets us to the music quicker if we just use words to get, if we use words to convey it. Although sometimes it's often words in front of music, or underscored words. So I mean, when the prosecutor is asking a little girl like what happened, I mean, in two lines, like, what did you see, honey? I don't know, just seemed more effective spoken, and that also gives contrast between. It gives me, by having a contrast between music not music, or sung not sung. It gives the choice of sung more meaning, and it gives the choice of spoken more meaning. Sort of the digital musical dramaturgy.
Yeah, I mean, in the scene of the crime, because we're just meeting these characters, we have a little bit of spoken words to introduce the idea of forensics in the piece, which of course, I learned about. Yeah, I learned about how a lot of forensic evidence has today been discounted through Mark's book. And so the East Cleveland Three were found supposedly with gunshot residue on their shoulders and coats. And so that's where the prosecutor, of course, who's eager to convince the audience that all these cases were totally airtight and don't listen to these bleeding heart, OIP people. And that's how we bring the idea of forensics into the room, where it's like, well, and the prosecutor, of course, believes that forensics are infallible. So we go from a verbatim section to a section where I had to write some text that sort of explored, or what am I trying to say? That sort of exposed forensics in a way as shaky. And so I wrote this very rhymy, very sort of I guess anthemic type of text that Scott said.
Well, I mean, so my reaction to that, the Wonder of Forensics section, was that I kind of was buying their point of view for the beginning of it until they got to the chorus of the Wonder of Forensic, because I mean, this is the most kind of, I think, the most kind of minimalistic kind of section of the score.
Here's the report of the bite marks, dental records. We know this guy did it. We need you to deliver.
The scene of the crime is stuffed with clues.
Who can blame us if we pick and choose?
Starts off with this really kind of cool marimba, Steve Reich kind of world repeating note, kind of crescendoing repeated notes kind of thing. And like there's a neutrality and objectivity and clinicalness to it that feels like, okay, this is something that feels like it's some sort of real truth. But then when they come in with that chorus on the Wonder of Forensics, it feels like suddenly it's revealed that this is kind of like an ad, and it's we're in the carousel of progress, and it related to me to the way the chorus is used in Trouble in Tahiti to kind of sell this notion of suburbia, that it's like it's something that clinical kind of minimalist language is something that's a tool that's being used. And the phrase that they sing later on, "Who can blame us as we pick and choose," is so revealing to me about the way that this forensic evidence is something that later on in the piece will be very important with Clarence's story, and the way he's kind of like obtaining this DNA that eventually is going to get him exonerated. It's not entirely coming from the point of view, I think, of that, the science itself is the problem. It's the way that it's being used and the way that it's kind of like purposely being, shown here to be a thing that is above question, without us kind of thinking about who's doing what with it. So I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
Well, musically, it was I was going to the world of using the language of PBS documentaries and ads for their funders, who are often scientific or pharmaceutical corporations, who very much want to convince you of these things. And the wonder and the chorus, it's the wonder of forensics, could be like the National Geographic theme on PBS. So you've said it. It's the intersection of quasi-scientific minimalist music that is then used to sell science, or sell an impression of science in one way or another. So that's the way in which musical language choice really is a design element within the piece.
And I would say what you said earlier about DNA. Of course, the DNA is the most reliable form of forensic evidence to link people to the scene of the crime. But other types over the decades, like blood spatter analysis, even dental record analysis, or I'm sorry, bite mark analysis, boot prints, um, fiber clumps, that kind of thing. All this stuff that wove its way into the lyrics. Yeah, those have been subjected to rigorous kind of like investigation, and it's shown that some forensic experts that made a decision one time in one case, like a few years later, in a blind test, would choose the other, evidence, so that there was an element of interpretation that went into this, as well as pressure from prosecutors to maybe link a certain piece of evidence to a certain alleged person. So I don't want to go on, but it's like it's another case of concision, like all these cases that we dramatize in the piece, to actually go and explain why blood spatter patterns or bite marks have been discounted would take up another half hour of the opera. So it had to be very concise. And I would say that all the rhyming, I think I let myself really just go crazy with the rhyming in that, because to me, like the PBS music style, if it rhymes, it must be right. It must all sort of fit together and have a sort of logic, because it has a sort of euphony that must be true, in a sense.
There's a certain kind of like formality to things kind of locking into place with the use of rhyme here, that makes it feel like it's over and done, right? That these are not questions that need to be continually kind of investigated, but rather this is like an answer rather than a question. Let's talk about one more piece now that you've brought up rhyming, which is the Cuyahoga section, which has a lot of rhyme in it. And Scott goes to a different place musically than a lot of the rest of the score as well. Tell me a little bit about like how you decided to go to that kind of specific place.
Well, I realized that as I was working on sections, I realized that there wasn't actually a bona fide protest song in the piece. I mean, obviously all the exonerees were horrified and outraged at what happened to them, and they express it in various ways. I just thought the East Cleveland Three would be good characters to sort of actually sing about, or to a number which is like, this is look at what's happening to us. This is monstrous. This is, I'm angry about this. And so I went and wrote, verses for them that were like in the spoken word hip hop sort of realm, which I don't normally do, but it just sort of flowed, and I wrote it down, and I thought, no, I'll see what Scott and Robin say to this.
Come on, let's do this. You're talking about the East Cleveland Three. Derek, Eugene, and Maurice, that's me. Three brothers stole off the street like a UFO. Shot down a beam. Where they at? Gee, I don't know. 20 long years they put us away. All cause a girl of 14 had her say. 20 long years in the pen. To survive inside, you gotta learn the art of Zen. I mean the place in your brain where you can take the strain of being so heinously framed and restrained every day. It's insane. A shame. A goddamn stain on humanity's name.
And yeah, and I didn't, of course I wasn't trying to write a cliche of a hip hop song or anything like that, because I can't do that, and I shouldn't, and I don't want to do that. Anyway, so Scott said it in a way that I think was just fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I think the trick is to sort of set it to avoid cliche, to use a style with irony. If we're able to really use the style with irony, and then we can avoid cliche. But again, the musical underpinning is from Cuyahoga, which we've heard all the way through. So again, it's a transformation of the motives that we've heard in other contexts and in other styles before. So it's not now the characters remain consistent with themselves, and don't adopt a different character or a different style of speaking in order to do the number. It's I mean, it's working. I think it, it's working, and it's working for people. So, um,
I mean, I think that's the moment where like the score is so far ranging, but it's the moment that feels the most contemporary and pulls us so much into the present moment. I think that having um, a scene that's not just about the injustice of putting these people into prison, but then what happens to them when they're there, if is really important to the takeaway of the piece. But to do it in this kind of structured way that has some fierceness to it, and reads as both who these characters have been all along, but also some things about what's happened to them. It struck me really, really powerfully.
It's also a chance. I mean, if the Cuyahoga follows a real suicide attempt that Eugene Johnson tried when he was being rebooked into prison. It's you'll come see the opera, you'll see the whole story. But he was released briefly by the court, sort of in the middle of his sentence, and but then on a technicality, they dragged him back into prison. And so when he was being rebooked, he grabbed a pen and tried to stab himself. He did stab himself with it. So we follow that up with Cuyahoga, which besides being like a protest, an expression of anger and rage, it also is a chance for the three of them to sort of in fiction at least to be in the same room with each other because they weren't really able to hang out with each other in those 20 years they were in prison. So it was a chance to bring them back together to, I don't know, help each other through, I suppose.
Wow. Can you tell me a little bit about what the reaction to the piece has been from the people that you've interviewed for this, to have this kind of these stories written about them?
I mean, I hesitate to put words in their mouth, but we made sure that they were involved through the workshop process. So, and we had people, exonerees attending the workshops. There was a specific moment when, well, there was an original lyric for Nancy's "Oh Lord" aria, where David quoted "For I was born a sinner," and but Nancy was very concerned that this would look like an admission of guilt, and she wanted nothing that gave any impression that she might feel guilty of anything. So we changed that lyric. We changed that lyric for Nancy when she made that objection. So that's an example of the input that we took. Because given what I feel a real sense of responsibility given what they're through. They, in general, I have a sense that they are very excited to see their lives presented on this scale. It's sort of the musical big screen on some level, just in scope. There's a level of it appears to be somewhat gratifying. So that appears to have been the reaction up to this point.
Nancy was in constant agony. She had 4 children out there.
They attended rehearsals. We did follow-up interviews with them that led to extra scenes later in the process. There's a scene between Derek Wheat and his mother on a visiting day when she comes to visit him, and he's very low, and they're separated by glass, and it's a very emotional mother-son scene, and that's sort of the inspiration for it came out of the interview with Derek. And I remember it's in Cincinnati, sitting behind him at one of the performances. And of course, you're like, oh my God, what is he? So, because the worst, of course, would have been that if any of them had said, whatever, if they'd been in any way disappointed or disapproved. And so I'm watching the back of Derek's head as the show's going on, and he's dabbing at his eyes during the scene. And so I'm like, okay, I'll assume that's a good sign, and very emotional scene. And yeah, so it was really, gratifying.
Well, it'll be even bigger when we see it at Lincoln Center, Jazz Lincoln Center, and I think the impact this is going to have on the audience is going to be enormous. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you about this piece, and I can't wait to see it again.
It's been great talking to you, Randall.
Yeah, thank you, Randall.
Thank you for listening to the Master Voices podcast. To learn more about Master Voices, visit mastervoices.org. You can discover our rich history, read chorus member spotlights, and buy tickets to upcoming performances. You can go there to support our work by making a tax-deductible donation. Your gift will allow us to continue our mission to spark greater human connections by reimagining what the choral experience can be. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.